Golden Sea Farm by Luther Torgerson. Illustrated by Frank Mayo. Have you ever wondered how two brothers can grow up in the same family and turn out completely different? It happens all the time. My younger brother Eric and I both grew up on the same farm in Iowa and are only 2 years apart in age. We both moved to St. Louis, Missouri after college. We even both volunteer at the same youth group, taking kids on field trips. So here is how you can tell us apart. We have totally different personalities. Eric is the one who takes the youth group kids on the roller coaster. After a day with Eric, they are giggling and throwing their arms around his neck. They call him Uncle Eric. Me? I'm Mr. Torgerson. No friendly Uncle Luther for me. I take the kids to the museum, after which they thank me politely. You probably understand the difference. From our neighborhood in St. Louis, it is less than 200 miles to Golden Sea. Golden Sea is the name of our old farm in Iowa. According to family memories, my great-grandmother Senia named it on a gorgeous autumn day during her first year on the farm. As soon as Senia and my great-grandfather Torger Torgerson arrived from Sweden in 1858, they planted about 2 acres of wheat in a field. The field was right in front of where they wanted to build their cabin. Later that autumn, they finished building the cabin that would shelter them during the first winter. Senia looked at her little golden wheat field waving in the wind. She planned to bake bread with that wheat all winter. They would survive on milk, bread, cheese, turnips, and the kindness of their Swedish-American neighbors. But for now, she forgot all the worries. Senia rocked gently in her rocking chair and felt the cool breeze and warm sun on her face. She was watching the golden grain moving like waves on the sea. Golden Sea, she said, using 2 English words she had recently learned. Our family has called the farm Golden Sea Farm ever since. When Eric and I grew up, we moved away from the farm, and our family later sold the farmhouse and land. Not long ago, Eric called me up with an idea for the youth group field trip. Let's take the kids out to Golden Sea for the day. They can run around, breathe some clean air. It'll be great. There were so many reasons I thought this was a bad idea. I didn't know where to start. First of all, I said, we haven't been back there in a long time. We don't even know who lives there now. And besides, we can't just show up on somebody's doorstep with a dozen 12-year-olds. It's just not done. Well, you probably can guess who won that argument. 2 weeks later, we were loading the kids into the vans and heading north to Golden Sea, our beloved boyhood home. As it turned out, we picked one of those glorious autumn days, like the day our great-grandmother Signe named the farm. We drove the vans up the long driveway that leads to the old farmhouse. I tried to see what name appeared on the mailbox, but I couldn't read it. I also looked around to see what had changed. It looked good. The house and barn were in good condition and nicely painted, too. There was a hay wagon in front of the barn, and roosters were pecking the ground. It was a lovely scene, and very much the way I remembered it. We told the kids to wait in their seats and went to knock on the door. We heard dogs barking as we approached, big dogs from the sound of their barking. Through force of old habit, we went to the kitchen door, just like we did when we were farm boys. We knocked and waited a long time for someone to come. Finally, through the lacy curtain on the kitchen door window, we could see a man coming to answer the door. We could see that he wore cowboy boots, jeans, and a straw cowboy hat. We could hear him yelling at the dogs to be quiet. As soon as he opened the door, it was clear from his dark skin and hair and his Spanish accent that he was Mexican-American. "Can I help you?" he asked in a quiet voice, opening the door only part way. I have to admit that I was a little distressed to approach a stranger, especially to ask him to let a group of kids visit his farm. When Eric and I were growing up, we knew everybody who lived near Golden Sea Farm. Now, after so many years, we were strangers to the people in the area, and they were strangers to us. But having a brother like Eric helps in this regard. As you might guess, Eric did the talking. "Buenos dias, señor," he said with a smile, using up most of the Spanish he knew. He continued in English, which the man also spoke. "We grew up on this farm years ago. We were wondering if we could have a look around," Eric said. The man seemed a little shy. Or was he suspicious? "Let's go," I said, under my breath to Eric, but he would have none of it. Before the man could answer, Eric tried again. "We brought some kids," he said, stepping away from the door and pointing to the vans in the driveway. Just then, the man's wife called, "Who's there?" from the other room, and she came into the kitchen. She was more Eric's type, I guess, because she smiled and greeted us. She was a little taller than her husband and was dressed in gardening clothes. She opened the door for us. "Would you like to come in?" "Well, we have some children waiting in the vans." "Children," she cut in, and her smile widened. "Let's go see." Eric and the woman marched out to the vans like they were old friends, leaving me and the man to straggle behind in silence. That day turned out to be the best youth group field trip ever. The kids climbed into the hayloft, ran through the rows of corn, and met their first goat named Linda. The Ortiz family was a perfect host and tour guide of Golden Sea. Eric and I found a few nails in the trunk of the tree where we had built a treehouse. Everywhere we turned, memories came flooding into our minds. Mrs. Ortiz even used the same half-acre for her vegetable garden that our family had used. She was canning pears from the same little orchard. It really was like coming home. And it was clear that this family loved Golden Sea Farm as much as everyone in my family had loved it, from our great-grandmother Senia down to Eric and me. For some reason, that made me very happy. On the way home, I expected most of the kids to fall asleep. They had run around so much. But they were city kids who had just spent the day with no traffic to dodge and no gates to shut them out. They were excited. For some reason, I was able to break out of myself for once. I didn't drive as I usually do. I sang songs with the kids and vigorously laughed at their stories about the day's adventure. When we got back to the parking lot in St. Louis, they tumbled out of the van and ran off to tell their families all about it. But they stopped, most of them, and gave me a big hug. "Thanks, Uncle Luther. That was really fun." And it was. What grows on the farm? Over the years, farmers have grown many different crops on the land that became Golden Sea Farm. Native Americans grew maize and squash. Later, other American farmers, such as the Torgerson and Ortiz families, grew a wide variety of crops. Here are a few of them. Corn, or maize. Corn was first developed thousands of years ago, probably in Mexico. Over the centuries, it became popular across much of North America. Settlers learned how to plant it, and it remains popular today. Alfalfa hay. Most crops have to be planted every year, but alfalfa hay is different. Farmers harvest alfalfa 2 or 3 times a year by cutting it down to the ground. Then they collect it into big rectangular bales and store it in the haylofts of their barns. They wait for the alfalfa in the fields to grow tall again. Soybeans. Soybeans are rich in both fat and protein, which are used in different ways. Most soybeans are squeezed to remove the oil or fat that is used to make margarine, salad dressing, and cooking oil. After the oil is removed, the remaining high-protein soybean fiber is toasted and added to food for animals such as hogs and chickens, and even pet dogs and cats. Humans eat soy foods too. Oats. Today, not many Iowa farmers still grow wheat as Senia did on the Golden Sea Farm in the 1800s. Most wheat production in the United States has moved west to places like Kansas, North Dakota, and Montana. However, golden fields of oats, a similar grain, can be seen waving in many Iowa fields at harvest time. Talk about it. Number 1. Why was Luther distressed when he and the youth group first arrived at Golden Sea Farm? Number 2. What lesson about people do you think Luther learned on his visit to the farm? Write about it. Number 3. Do you know anyone who is quiet like Luther? Or anyone who is very friendly, like his brother Eric. On a separate sheet of paper, list Luther's and Eric's main personality traits. Then pick one trait and write about a person you know who has a similar personality. Extend language. The Spanish word for corn, or maize, is maize. The Haitian Creole word for oats is avwam. What words in another language do you know for the English words corn, alfalfa, soybeans, oats, or another farm crop?